Good morning, you guys, it's Karen, and I thought I would come and do another grief diary. You may remember in the last one I said that I would come back and do one if ever I felt something different, or if anything else happened. And I wanted to come and talk to you about the psychic experience briefly, because I know that people will be interested in that. And I wanted to tell you about, as I may put in the title, kind of anger and regrets that I've been feeling, because anything that I'm feeling I think is useful to share. I know that you guys have all found this really helpful to those of you that are going through grief. And you know, a lot of you were so kind after my dad died, and a lot of you had lost like children and partners, and that is just beyond my comprehension. It really is, because obviously losing a parent is the natural order of things, not necessarily when they're young, but dad was neither young nor really old, you know, but it was, of course it was difficult. But to lose a partner, I just can't even imagine, because it's my partner that's helped me get through it on a daily basis, you know, and he's been there every day. To have a partner every day and then they're suddenly not there, or to have a child who's completely dependent on you and then they're not there, is just beyond my comprehension. The closest thing I can think about is my Watson. I know some people won't like that, he's just a dog, etc, etc, but he's the closest thing I have that is a dependent, and of course we found another few lumps on him and are waiting for the results to find out if there is any more cancer. Hopefully there won't be, but it does make you think, you know, about losing him. And you know, he's a special needs dog, and he needs injections and medication and special washes, and he needs something doing like every day. He needs a lot of looking after, and so I can't even imagine, like I can't imagine losing him. So I can't imagine losing a child or a partner. So let me tell you about the anger and the regrets. The anger has been, I just feel angry at nobody in particular. I feel angry that I didn't have time with dad before he died. And the anger is at my migraines. Like I said, it's not at anybody, it's at my migraines. But because of my migraines, I didn't spend the time I would have done with dad. I used to, when he first moved up here, I would see him a couple of times a week. You know, we would go out, we would go shopping and things like that. And that kind of tapered off with my migraines. And I always had these thoughts in my head of, you know, we'll go and do this, we'll go and do that. And I'll take dad here, I'll take dad there after these migraines are better, because there was often times I was going over to see him, and instead of spending time with him, I would literally just pop in for a cup of tea and make sure that he was okay. We were always there if he needed us, and I did still see him once a week, but it just wasn't a fun visit for him either, because I was like, you know, kind of squinting most of the time at him, because he's got a loud voice, and his wife Eve, because she's deaf, she's got a very loud voice, you know, not particularly high spirited. And so I'm angry at the time that I could have had I not had migraines, but there's nothing I can do about it, so it's kind of a useless emotion, you know. And I remember reading, at one point I read about the cycle that you go through, you know, with grief. There is these stages of denial and anger and acceptance, etc. I have no idea what stage I'm at, but one thing that I realised is that it's a much longer process than I thought. I initially thought, I suppose that this is typical me, I want to rush everything, that, you know, a few months later you'd be feeling a lot better. It wasn't the case at all. It's been a year and a few months, and it feels like only weeks in some ways, although it's definitely getting easier. I still can't look at his photos like a photo album, although I have animated, I don't know if I did 2 or 3, but I animated a couple of photos. I'll put them in because you guys won't have specifically known my dad, so it won't freak you out. Some people they've been freaked out by it, but it's lovely. It's is it called My Heritage, and it animates the photo as if they're looking around the room, and it makes me smile so much. And there was a time not long ago they couldn't even look at that, you know. I just couldn't look at any photos, but I can now look at those. I've got them sitting on my desktop, and I click on them and watch him, and it looks like him, 100% looks like him smiling, even though you know, it's a digital animation. It looks like him smiling, and it makes me feel like he's close, you know. It's the only time I feel like I'm smiling and I remember him, like as if I can touch him, kind of thing. So yeah, this cycle, I could well be in the anger stage now. I don't know what order they come in or whatever. And so maybe it isn't a useless emotion. But when I think about it and I'm like, bloody hell, I'm so bloody angry that these migraines took so much away from me. And they took time, precious time I could have had with Dad. I could have been much more cheerful, cheered him up when he was down, you know, had more laughs because he was a very jokey guy. But I just was always low energy, you know, low mood when I went to see him over the last few years because of these blooming migraines. And the other thing I get angry at is the lockdown. You know, I'm not angry at myself for not hugging him, but I wish I had hugged him. You know, I saw him on his birthday on May the 3rd. He died on May the 20. Do you know, I thought that date would be burnt in my memory and I cannot now remember what date it was. 23rd of May. So 20 days after I saw him, he died. I will have seen him a couple of times at a distance, dropping off shopping or whatever. But the day I saw him on his birthday, he wanted a hug. And I know, and I said, you know, it's best not to. And I was kind of having a go at him about, because he was getting me to do something in his phone and he would just hand me his phone. And I was like, right, okay, you now need to sanitize this before I hand it back to you. You know, it just wasn't really paying attention to the rules. He wasn't himself that day, and he phoned me the next day and apologised, bless him. And I was like, you've nothing to apologise, it's me. I shouldn't have been having a go at you, but I just want you to be safe, kind of thing, you know. And he said, I don't know, I'm not feeling myself. But I know he wanted a hug. He said it in a particular way of, you know, I can't believe you can't even get a hug from your child on your birthday. And he sort of looked at me and I was like, oh, Dad, we can't, you know, it's just too risky. And I wish I'd have hugged him. And I know that everybody said to me, and I went through the same feeling of, if I'd have hugged him, he could have got COVID and he could have died a horrible death from COVID. And that would have been worse, much worse, because he'd have been in hospital. I wouldn't have been able to see him. He would have been alone. It would have been more frightening. He would have known that there was a chance of him dying. So I understand that logic, but that's not what happened. What happened is I didn't give him a hug and he will have felt rejected. I know him and I know that he will have felt rejected. I can tell you 100%, you know, he's the type of person that will have thought, oh, she's not bothered about not hugging me, or, you know. And so I do regret that. I regret not hugging him. I wish that I could go back and give him a hug. And there is that chance that it could have turned out horribly, but it could have turned out the same way and at least he had a hug. And I had hugged my dad, you know, because I hadn't hugged him for a long, long time before that. So there's the anger at the lockdown, the anger at the migraines, the regret of the hug. But I also have another regret, which is a bit of an odd one. Oh, I think I just pulled my earring out. Yes, I did. It's a bit of an odd one because I regret it, but I'm not sure I'd make a different decision. So I regret having him cremated slightly. It's not a huge regret. It's one of those that if I could hear from my dad from beyond the grave and him tell me he was okay with it, I think I'd feel better. But I think when I asked him and did his will and said, do you want to be buried or cremated? He had initially said buried. And then he'd said, well, you do whatever you want. I don't care after I'm gone. You can do what you want with me. And almost as his last joke, he had ticked buried and cremated on the blooming will when I opened it, you know. And I kind of knew that. I was laughing, like, he was like, you decide. And so I decided to have him cremated. And the reason I made that decision was because I don't know whether I will live in this city forever. Kev's changing jobs, offices. His office is moving possibly to Glasgow next year. So there's lots of reasons why we might not end up staying here. And so in my head, if we had buried Dad here, I would then have to leave him behind and that would have just killed me, you know. And also, for my own kind of sanity, I knew that if he was buried here, I would feel kind of as I did in life. I always felt guilty about not seeing Dad enough, you know, and I would feel the same. I would feel like I had to go and see him once or twice a week or whatever it may be. I know that I would put that pressure on myself, and I didn't think that was fair, and I didn't think my dad would want that. So that's why I decided to go with cremation. And the reason that I regret it is there's one really silly one, which I've told you guys before, which is for all the programs we've watched, like Supernatural, and we used to watch Angel and Buffy the Vampire and all that kind of thing years ago. There's this kind of thought that when there's a spirit around, you then burn the body and then the spirit goes away. And so I feel like I have taken away the chance of speaking to my dad's spirit. Like I said, I'm not even a believer, and yet that's the thing I worry about. But more than that, I have driven past where I would turn off to go and see him. There's a shopping place I go to. There's quite a few places I go to actually where I drive past where I would turn off, and his little flat was not far from that turn off. And often I'd go to the shops, I'd phone him and say, I'm going to come in for a visit. Do you want me to come now, or do you want me to go do my shopping and then I'll pop in on the way back, depending if he was sleeping or not, if he wanted something from the shops, you know, that kind of thing. And when I go past that now, it's actually quite close to the crematorium where he was cremated. But I always think, well, if he was buried, there's also a burial place there. I would have gone and visited him. The other day when I was driving, I was like, it wouldn't have been, I feel that I had to. I just would have loved to have gone and sat, had a cup of tea, you know, taken a flask of tea with me, had a cup of tea with Dad and had a chat with him at a graveside. And I know that I can bury his ashes there. His ashes have been split. I gave half to his wife and I sent some to my brother, who has buried them, I believe. But it wouldn't be the same to me burying ashes. I'd rather keep the ashes with me, because the whole point was that I can take them with me. And if I ever have a forever home, I will bury them in the garden, you know, with a tree or something like that. And at the moment I can take them out. I do take them out and have a chat to them. But knowing that his actual body was there would mean more to me than his ashes. And I think that's something that I still struggle with. I still have these thoughts in my head of, right, I can't turn off there because Dad's not there. He doesn't live there anymore. Like, he is nowhere. His body is nowhere in the world. It's just doesn't exist anymore. And that's something I find really difficult to come to terms with, you know, whereas even if his body, knowing he was gone, but his body is under the ground and his body is there and I can talk to this grave and his body is underneath, I feel would be a real comfort to me. And obviously there's nothing I can do about that. So I regret the decision, like I say, but I don't necessarily think it was the wrong decision. I don't know whether that makes sense because it's a bit contradictory, but if I ever leave, if I say I'd have had him buried, I do think I'd have felt guilty if I didn't go often enough to visit him. And if I'd have left, I would have been really, really upset and I wouldn't have known what to do. And then I'd have felt like I had to come back here to see him, and that would have been a whole mess of emotions as well, you know. So I don't think there is necessarily a right decision unless you are lucky enough to have had a family where, you know, you live where you were all brought up and all that. You know, our family is very, very disjointed. And actually it's not Dad's home, you know. I don't know where Dad would consider his home, to be honest. So that's where the regret comes in, the main regret, and what I've been thinking about lately. And like I said, I feel like almost if he could come from beyond the grave, from beyond the cremation, and tell me that he's okay with it, that would help a little bit, you know. And if I felt like I could take his ashes out and talk to him and he was actually listening, he was actually there, that would also help. So onto the psychic. So I looked up a psychic and found one who I could have actually gone to see face to face, and I did think I'd prefer that, but I thought, let me be brave and do a Skype call, because it means I don't have to try and get on public transport or try and get Kev to give me a lift, because a lot of the time I can't drive if my head's bad, and also then it kind of opens the doors for me being able to use ones in different parts of the country that I can't get to, you know. But I found this one, she was very well reviewed and had amazing reviews, and I thought, this is great. And so I did this Skype call with her. I have actually recorded the whole psychic reading, and it's on my Patreon channel. Patreon channel is something I don't talk about very often, but it's a private channel, but any of you could join. It costs about £4 or £5 a month. You can leave at any point, so you could join, pay your £4 or £5, watch as many videos as you want and leave. The reason that was set up is because I used to do vlogs on this channel that we're on just now, and many different things happened. I got in trouble at work for filming my journey to work, which I eventually got an apology for, but I tell the whole story about that also over on Patreon. So anyway, the whole psychic episode is filmed and over on Patreon if you were interested. But basically, she couldn't have been more wrong about everything. And she was obviously somebody that was brought up in a traditional family with a mum and dad who stayed together and wasn't used to broken families at all, because she would say things that I was like, well, you know, like she said something about my dad tried to stay in my life, and I'm like, well, he brought us up, so, you know, yeah, he did try and stay in our life. And she would say, she talked about my mum being devastated that my dad was gone, and I'm like, no, my mum couldn't stand him. You know, you could tell her mindset wasn't that of divorced, broken families. That she got a lot of other things very, very wrong as well. Like she said, oh, your dad was a very active man, and he wasn't active at all. He definitely wasn't active. So it was very disappointing, because you know, obviously you go in full of hope with these things, and I'm such a skeptic. I don't know if anybody could convince me, but obviously somebody getting things so very wrong doesn't help, and I desperately want to believe that there is something after, you know, and that dad's consciousness is still around. And there is, I suppose the reason I continue to believe is not through any kind of faith. It is because there is some science that shows that your consciousness does continue on. There's, you know, it's only a small area at the moment that needs to be explored a lot more, but there's a few neurologists that have had experiences of like patients that have told them exactly what was happening during the operation, but they know that they were completely under or dead at the time, that kind of thing. So I am definitely going to go to another psychic at some point. I haven't had a chance to research any, but it's something I will do again, and see, yeah, if anything comes through, if you like. So that's that. That's kind of what's been going on with the grieving of dad. I think of him every single day. I was telling Kev that the other day. I said, you know, it changes you. Grief like this of somebody close to you changes you. And I suppose, although, like I'm saying, it's different to a partner and whatnot, I had my dad in my life for, you know, 48 years, and so it's going to take a long time to get used to him not being here. And there still was one time I was thinking, oh, I must tell dad about that, you know, and just for a second you forget. So I think about him every day. I still cry about him, you know, missing him, and just especially now, you notice everything on TV, you know, anything you're watching where they're talking about their relationship with their dad, or, you know, like even I was watching a reality program, and it's a girl called Marnie who's getting married, and they put on I'd Like to Dance with My Father Again. Oh god, that was me away, you know. And if I watch Long Lost Families, I don't know whether you ever watched that, my god, that has me going as well. It's definitely made me more emotional. Interestingly, Kev said to me that he thinks it's changed me. He said he's noticed a big change since my dad dying, but also he said he's not 100% sure how much of it is the migraines getting worse, how much of it is dad, but he thinks it's mostly dad. And he said, I feel like you're less tolerant of people in general, not specifically him, but he said, I just feel like you're less tolerant. And I don't know why that would be, and I don't know that I've noticed that. I feel like that's down to the migraines, but yeah, Kev has said that it's definitely changed me, and I would be sad if it had made me less tolerant, because as I said, I want it to be more my way of continuing dad on in the world, is to be more dad, you know, is to be everything that was good about him, the jolly side of him, the kind side of him, the funny side of him, is to try and continue that on. And I'm good at being kind, but I'm not great at being funny, you know, and trying to be positive and all that kind of thing. So that's what I want to try and be more of. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling now because I've got another video to do for my beauty channel. I hope that this was interesting to you. Let me know your experiences with all this. It's really comforting and interesting to hear other people's experiences. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll speak to you again soon.